I'm Alan Simpson, and this is a summary of the series of talks that I gave to Nottingham University following the largely disappointing outcomes of the COP27 round and the divisions and deterioration that has followed ever since. You don't need to be a genius to know that the world is in a horrible, horrible mess, that we have a dearth of political leadership at an international and national level. We have wars that are breaking out everywhere and pitting people against each other. And you have chasms that are opening up between the richest and the poorest. And yet, faced with all of that, we're still ignoring the bigger challenges, the existential challenges that are there, that are heading our way. In a way, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are all to do with climate change. They are to do with the crises that we're going to face in terms of food, energy security, ecosystem repair, and the need to develop a completely different economics of well-being. And that's what the series of talks is about. The key element that links them all is the notion that today the conventional is part of the problem and only the radical is now reasonable. So I want to just trail through the opening elements of this and what we then have to do in each of those specific categories of issues and challenges that we face. So the first of these relates to the climate change and the poor. The UN knows that there's no credible pathway now to 1.5 degrees centigrade in place. None of the economic measures that the countries have been taking address this. So in a sense, the window dressing is not even beginning to tackle the chaos inside the building, inside the country, inside the planet. And we're seeing the outcome of this in terms of wild weather events and the heat that ran amok around large parts of the developed and developing world. So that we have to address this by changing everything, beginning with how we think. And that is going to take us into questions about the circularity of solutions rather than the piecemeal nature of policy proposals that we're currently on offer. So this includes, seriously addressing issues of loss and damage, carbon budgeting, food security, waste, how we manage it, what is the future of our towns and cities, and where and how we engage with energy democracy as well as energy security, and what transport and water policies are going to mean at the center of the next economics. Many people say, all that's fine, but it's just impossible to afford. The reality is that it isn't the poor who are going to have to pay for this. And what we can see already is that it is the richest 10% of the global population who are responsible for almost half of the total carbon emissions. And the poorest 50% are responsible for less than 10%. So perversely, what we're going to have to argue for is that the poorest actually have to increase their carbon footprint and carbon consumptions. And that has to be paid for by contractions that are largely the responsibility of the richest and whose lifestyles are going to be most profoundly affected by those reductions if we're going to survive at all. And so this really takes us into net zero economics. I think you can find the basis of these not in conventional free market economic thinkers, but turning it right back to the most ancient of wisdoms. And there's a wonderful example of this in the Iroquois nations, their great law of peace, which is probably the longest standing democracy on the planet. But their great law of peace, written by Hiawatha and others, actually has one element to it. The core of it says that the policy decisions made at their powwows, were their annual parliaments, if you like, all the proposals had to address whether they worked in the interests of the next 7 generations of those who followed. In current economic terms, you'd be lucky to get MPs making commitments that lasted for the next 7 weeks or 7 months. And that the fact that we're being consumed by short-termism is a central part of the problem. We have to move to our own longer-term view of what an economics of survival is going to look like. And it's going to be based on how we repair, restore, and redistribute, how we deal with carbon contracting, carbon rationing in ways that allow the planet to tolerate our existence on it. And we have to have planet first economics that put back more than we take out. Some of the examples of where we start are relatively easy. One example in the UK is this notion about ghost flights. Since 2019, a number of airports and flight operators who operate what are called ghost flights is astonishing. They have these flights in order to continue to have an entitlement to the landing rights in different airports around the planet. But it means that they are conducting empty flights in order to maintain those landing and parking rights. 35,000 flights that were less than 10,000, the 10% full, and that the UK alone currently runs 500 ghost flights a month. This has no utility value at all. It is running with the notion that those carbon emissions that come from ghost flights are somehow contractually necessary in order to make the current market system work. But that market system is at the core of what is actually heading us towards the apocalypse that threatens our own human existence on the planet. Some of the inabilities that we have of challenging this are actually locked into how the balance of democratic rights has shifted over the last 2 or 3 decades. When I was born as a citizen, not so much as a consumer. I became a consumer or customer under Margaret Thatcher, and ever since then, we have had commodified existence. But even that has seen a transfer of powers and entitlements away from citizens and in favor of corporations. And the most blatant example of what that means is in the current Energy Charter Treaty, where corporations can sue citizens and national governments if they attempt to do something which puts the planet before corporate profit and which thereby threatens their profitability. And so this is a nightmare of a legacy, which is almost a sort of doomsday commitment. And if there's one thing that nations can do, it is to say that the 48 countries currently who are signed into this Charter Treaty need to get out of it. And the dozens more of countries around Africa and Asia and Latin America needs to be persuaded that they actually, not only is it unhelpful for them to be going down that path, but they need to be heading in completely the opposite direction. Because only by inverting that thinking and putting sustainability issues before corporate profits are any of us going to have the chance of surviving. So that's the key set of issues that I am trying to address in this series of talks, and I hope you'll stay with me and be part of it.